Hello everyone, welcome back to one-to-one tutoring. Last episode we finished all the external factors of class that affect educational achievement, and now we're going to move on to the internal factors to do with class. As we've covered before, the internal factors are factors within school and the education system, such as labeling, the self-fulfilling prophecy, pupil subcultures, and streaming and setting. We're going to start and finish internal factors within this video, and the first factor we're going to look at is labeling. To label someone is to attach a meaning or definition to them. For example, teachers could label a student as bright or stupid, or as lazy or hardworking. Studies have shown that teachers don't attach labels to pupils based on their ability or attitude, but rather on the basis of stereotyped assumptions about their class background. Therefore, middle class students are often labeled positively, whereas working class students are labeled negatively. In 1971, Howard Becker carried out a study into labeling based on interviews with 60 Chicago high school teachers. He found that teachers judged pupils according to how closely they fitted the image of an ideal pupil. Pupils' work, behavior, and appearance were all factors that affected teachers' judgments. Middle-class children were seen as the closest to the ideal pupil, and working-class pupils were seen as the furthest. Hempel-Jorgensen also found that teachers may have different notions of the ideal pupil. In a working class school where discipline is an issue, then the ideal pupil is seen as quiet, passive, and obedient. However, in a middle class school, ideal pupils were judged in terms of personality and academic achievement. The next internal factor we're going to consider is the self-fulfilling prophecy. This is a prediction that comes true simply by the virtue of it being made. Sociologists argue that labeling causes working class underachievement because of the self-fulfilling prophecy. They believe this occurs in 3 stages. Step 1. A teacher labels a student, and using this label they make a prediction about their attainment. For example, they label a student as lazy and therefore predict they will fail their exams. Step 2. The teacher treats the pupil according to this label, acting as if the prediction is already true. For example, they will give the lazy pupil a lower level of work and maybe less attention. Step 3. The pupil internalizes this label as it becomes part of their self-image, which is the way they view themselves, meaning they act like the label describes them, causing the prediction to be fulfilled. And therefore, back in our example, the pupil sees themselves as lazy, acts this way, and eventually underachieves. In 1968, Rosenthal and Jacobson convinced the school that they could identify which pupils had potential and which did not using a new IQ test. This was false, yet the teachers still believed what they were told, and a year later, nearly half of the pupils seen as having potential made significant progress. Therefore, it's clear that the teachers began to treat those students seen as having potential differently because they made more progress. The next internal factor is streaming. This involves placing students into different ability groups or classes called streams that are taught separately for all subjects. Studies have shown that the self-fulfilling prophecy is likely to occur when pupils are streamed because streams ultimately illustrate what expectations teachers have of students. As we saw on the slide on labeling, Becker shows that working class pupils aren't seen as ideal pupils, meaning they are seen as lacking ability and therefore are put into lower streams. When a student is put into a lower stream, they miss out on knowledge and information needed to succeed. Middle class pupils benefit from streaming because they are often seen as ideal pupils by teachers and are therefore put into higher streams. Once a student is streamed, it is difficult for them to move up or down, so they are basically locked into the expectations that are given to them by teachers. Douglas found that pupils placed into lower streams at age 8 suffered a decline in IQ by 11, and those at the same age placed in a lower stream had increased IQ by 11. In 2001, Gilborn and Udell studied 2 London secondary schools. They linked streaming to the publishing of exam league tables, which essentially rank schools according to their exam performance, and Gilborn and Udell argue that this creates something called an A to C economy. This is a system that only invests time, effort, and resources on pupils that are seen to have potential to achieve 5 GCSEs or more to boost the school's rank in the league tables. This process is called educational triage. Triage just means sorting and is typically used on battlefields where medics have to sort soldiers' injuries into categories to prioritize them for treatment. Gilborn and Udell argue that teachers categorize pupils as those who will pass anyways, those with the potential to get a C grade, and hopeless cases who are doomed to fail. Since we know working class pupils are seen as having low ability, they are more likely to be seen as hopeless cases, which produces the self-fulfilling prophecy and for failure. The need for schools to have good league table rankings causes schools to stream pupils. The next internal factor is pupil subcultures. These are groups of pupils who share similar values and behavior patterns. They often emerge as a response when pupils are labeled or streamed. In 1970, Colin Lacey developed concepts of how pupil subcultures were formed. The first is differentiation. This is the process of teachers categorizing pupils based on how they perceive their ability. So therefore, streaming is a form of differentiation. Those seen as having ability are deemed superior and are therefore placed into higher streams, whereas those seen as lacking ability are deemed inferior by being placed into lower streams. The next concept that Colin Lacey developed was polarization. This is the process of students being separated into one of two opposite poles, which are anti-school and pro-school subcultures. Pro-school subcultures consist of students who have been placed into a higher stream. They tend to remain committed to school's values of obedience, punctuality, and hard work, and therefore gain status in an approved manner. Anti-school subcultures are made up of students placed into lower streams who have been now deemed inferior. Therefore, these students gain status through alternative and often illegitimate methods, such as making fun of teachers, truanting, or not doing homework. Pro and anti-school subcultures are two types of responses to labeling. Peter Woods argues that there are other responses are possible, such as ingratiation, which is being a teacher's pet, ritualism, which is going through the motions of school and staying out of trouble, retreatism, which is basically daydreaming and mucking about, and rebellion, which is outright rejection of everything school stands for. John Furlong adds that many people may come from different types of responses rather than being committed to just one. Pupil class identities. So far, we focused on internal processes of school that affect achievement, like labeling and streaming. But some sociologists want to see how pupils' identities outside of school affects their achievement. And to understand this, we need to now know Bourdieu's idea of habitus. Bourdieu sees habitus as the disposition and ways of thinking that people of a social class possess. Since schools possess middle-class habitus, it advantages middle-class pupils. Although not one habitus is better than another, middle class have the power to impose their habitus on the education system, meaning it is seen as more desirable. Pupils who have been socialized into middle class habitus gain status and recognition from this and are deemed to have worth and value. In contrast, schools devalue working class habitus as it is seen as tasteless. As a result, working class students may experience education as unnatural and alien since they don't possess middle class habitus. We are now going to evaluate all the internal factors. Labeling theory has been accused of being too deterministic because it assumes that once a pupil is labeled, they have no choice but to internalize this, which is wrong because some pupils may choose to try to prove the label wrong by working hard. Marxists also criticize labeling as it ignores the wider structure in which labeling takes place, and it blames teachers for labeling without any explanation. Marxists also argue that labels are not the result of teachers' prejudice, but is the education system that recreates the class divide. Thank you for watching. We just covered the whole of internal factors. Next episode, we're going to start ethnic differences in achievement. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more.